Welcome to C.S. Lewis Inspired. Have you ever fasted and felt like nothing changed? Have your prayers seemed to echo back unanswered? Or maybe you're wondering, why does fasting even matter? You're not alone. Many believers attempt fasting, only to give up in frustration when they don't see the breakthrough they were hoping for. The truth? Most churches never teach the true biblical way to fast. But today, that changes. You're about to uncover three powerful biblical secrets about fasting that can completely transform your walk with God. And if you stay until the end, you'll discover a key that Jesus himself revealed, a key that could unlock the supernatural power of God in your life. Let's dive in. Secret number one, fasting in the Old Testament. More than just food deprivation. For many, fasting means skipping meals, but in the Bible, it was so much more. In the Old Testament, fasting wasn't about hunger. It was about humility, surrender, and deep spiritual alignment with God's will. When Israel faced national crises, sought divine direction, or repented from sin, fasting was their response. But it wasn't just about food, it was about transformation. One of the most striking examples is found in Jonah 3:5-10. When Jonah warned the city of Nineveh of God's judgment, the entire nation, from the king to the lowest servant, even their animals, fasted as a desperate plea for mercy. Another powerful symbol of fasting was sackcloth and ashes. Covering oneself in ashes wasn't an empty ritual. It was an outward sign of deep internal repentance. Take Daniel 9:3. Daniel fasted and wore sackcloth and ashes, not to manipulate God, but to seek divine intervention. And in Joel 2:12, God calls his people to return to him with all your heart, with fasting, weeping, and mourning. This tells us something crucial. True fasting isn't about suffering. It's about seeking God with everything we have. Look at these biblical figures. Moses fasted 40 days before receiving the 10 Commandments, Exodus 34:28. David fasted in mourning and repentance, 2 Samuel 12:16. Ezra fasted for divine protection, Ezra 8:21. Nehemiah fasted before rebuilding Jerusalem, Nehemiah 1:4. Esther called for a national fast before risking her life before the king, Esther 4:16. What do they all have in common? Their fasting wasn't just about food, it was about desperate dependence on God. But here's where many go wrong. Fasting isn't meant to twist God's arm. In Isaiah 58, God rebukes those who fast without true repentance. He makes it clear, fasting without justice and mercy is meaningless. So let's ask ourselves, are we fasting correctly? Are we just giving up food, or are we truly seeking transformation? Because if we fast but remain unchanged, we've missed the entire point. The hunger we feel during fasting should be a reminder of our deeper hunger for God. Secret number two, the true purpose of fasting: transformation, not just sacrifice. Many people see fasting as a way to show devotion, to endure hunger as a sign of faith. But is that really what God desires? The Bible teaches that fasting is worthless if it's just a religious exercise. God isn't impressed by suffering, he's after transformation. In Isaiah 58, God confronted the Israelites who fasted but continued in injustice and selfishness. He asked, "Is this the kind of fast I have chosen? Only a day for people to humble themselves?" Isaiah 58:5. Then he revealed what true fasting looks like: to loose the chains of injustice, to set the oppressed free, to share your food with the hungry. Isaiah 58:6-7. In other words, fasting is not about empty rituals. It's about aligning with God's heart. If we look at biblical fasts, they were always tied to a greater purpose. Moses fasted to receive the law. Nehemiah fasted to rebuild Jerusalem. Daniel fasted for spiritual understanding. Fasting was never the goal. It was the preparation for something greater. True fasting weakens the flesh, but strengthens the spirit. When done with the right heart, it sharpens our ability to hear God's voice and aligns our desires with his will. But here's the key. Fasting must be paired with prayer and holiness. If we fast but continue living the same way, we are missing the mark. Secret number three, Jesus brought a new meaning to fasting. Some think fasting ended with the Old Testament. It didn't. Jesus didn't abolish fasting. He elevated it. In the Old Testament, fasting was often linked to mourning and repentance. But Jesus taught that fasting is not about public recognition. It's about private devotion to God. In Matthew 6:16-18, Jesus warned against fasting for show. When you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to others that you are fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen. True fasting is an intimate act of worship, not a performance. Jesus also explained that fasting should be done with understanding. In Mark 2:19-20, he said his disciples didn't need to fast while he was with them, but after he was gone, they would. This tells us something huge. Fasting is a way to draw closer to God. Even Jesus himself fasted for 40 days in the wilderness before beginning his ministry. Matthew 4:2. During this time, he faced intense temptation, but he emerged victorious, showing that fasting empowers us spiritually. And perhaps the most powerful statement about fasting comes from Mark 9:29. When the disciples failed to cast out a demon, Jesus explained, "This kind can come out only by prayer and fasting." Some spiritual battles can only be won through fasting and prayer. It's a powerful tool to break strongholds, overcome temptation, and walk in greater spiritual authority. Conclusion. The power of fasting isn't about giving up food. It's about gaining spiritual clarity and transformation. Jesus taught that fasting isn't a burden. It's a privilege. It strengthens our spirit, aligns our will with God's, and prepares us for supernatural breakthroughs. So now that you know these 3 biblical secrets, how will you approach fasting differently? Let me know in the comments. And if this teaching blessed you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. I'll see you in the next one.